My name is Priya, and this is my story, a true tale of infidelity. I'm Priya, a 29-year-old caregiver. I hail from a quaint village in India. A realm where aspirations frequently fade away before they have the chance to flourish. For ages, I believed my life was meant to adhere to a routine trajectory. Being wed to a man selected by my parents, dedicating my life to nurturing children, and managing a household that never felt like my own. However, I desired something greater. 2 years ago, I arrived in the United States, brimming with optimism for a new beginning. I was employed by the Harrisons, an affluent family in Connecticut, to look after their 2 children, Emily and Jake. The task was flawless. Or so I believed. Lisa, the mother, exuded warmth and hospitality. At first, Daniel, her husband, appeared somewhat aloof, yet maintained a courteous demeanor. The children swiftly grew fond of me, and I cherished looking after them. So profound that it eats away at my soul each and every day. I'm involved with Daniel. As I pen these words, a weight of shame constricts my chest. Lisa has complete faith in me. She has complimented me numerous times for the attention I provide to her children, for the meals I cook, and for how I have simplified their lives. And yet, I have wronged her in the most profound manner imaginable. It was never meant to unfold this way. I didn't arrive here seeking this. Yet, Daniel possesses a unique ability to make me feel acknowledged and comprehended like no one else ever has. Now I find myself ensnared in a tangled web of desire and betrayal, powerless to escape. Yet burdened by the gravity of my choices, each day I remind myself it's time to cease, to turn away. Yet, the idea of losing him, despite knowing he doesn't belong to me, is simply intolerable. This clandestine relationship has transformed into my most profound refuge, and my most significant remorse. How did it end up like this? How did I, an ordinary girl from India with aspirations for a brighter future, find myself in this place, concealed within the confines of another woman's dwelling? To grasp the essence, one must delve into the origins of it all. Upon my initial arrival in the United States, I was engulfed by a sense of overwhelming sensations. The air was frigid, more piercing than anything I had ever experienced back home, and the streets appeared astonishingly expansive. I had never experienced being apart from my family before. As I stepped out of the airport and into the whirlwind of taxis and bustling strangers, a wave of uncertainty washed over me. What was I doing here, so far from the only life I had ever known? The Harrisons awaited my arrival at their grand residence in Connecticut. The home was expansive, featuring white columns, meticulously maintained lawns, and large windows that appeared to glisten even under the faint winter sunlight. Lisa was the first to greet me, a tall, graceful presence. A woman in her late 30s, she embraced me warmly and said, "We're so glad you're here, Priya." Her words, though straightforward, made me feel acknowledged in a way I hadn't anticipated. Daniel emerged shortly after, cradling their youngest child, Emily. On his hip. He smiled, a fleeting yet sincere expression, and stretched out his free hand. "Welcome," he said, his voice rich and unwavering. From the very beginning, the children, Emily and Jake, were utterly delightful. Emily was 3, sporting curly blonde hair and a mischievous grin, while Jake, at 6, was more subdued, perpetually grasping a book or a toy he refused to share. They appeared to warm up to me right away, trailing behind as I unpacked and bombarding me with inquiries about where I originated and if I possessed the skills to bake cookies. The initial weeks passed in a haze as I navigated the changes of my new existence. My days were filled with nurturing the children, crafting their meals, and maintaining the harmony of the household. Lisa was immersed in her career and social obligations, frequently departing early and returning late. Daniel, in contrast, spent more time working from home than I had anticipated. Perpetually absorbed in, engaged in his tasks or sidetracked by his device. He wasn't particularly engaged with the children, yet it appeared he cared for them in his own unique manner. I believed he was merely another busy American dad, focused on supporting his family. As the weeks transformed into months, I started to observe certain details. The manner in which his voice took on a gentle quality when addressing me, the lingering glances exchanged as we passed each other. Another in the corridor, his inquiries about my day. Even in Lisa's presence were always thoughtful. Initially, I brushed it off as mere benevolence. One evening, months after I had settled into the job, I began to sense a change. I had just settled the children down for the night, and was tidying up. The kitchen came alive as Daniel walked in. He wore a casual outfit of jeans and a sweater, his dark hair a bit tousled. As if he had been running his fingers through it. "You don't have to do all that," he said, gesturing to the. "I was scrubbing the dishes. It's part of my job," I said with a smile. Even as my hands trembled slightly while I worked. He rested against the counter, observing me for a brief moment. "Nevertheless," he remarked, "you accomplish more than sufficient nearby. Lisa and I feel fortunate to have you in our lives." There was a quality in his tone that caused me to hesitate. I gazed up at him, and for the first time, I sensed the intensity of his stare. It wasn't the courteous interest of a boss. It was a completely different experience. I swiftly completed the dishes and made my exit, seeking refuge in my room, yet that night, as I lay in bed, I found myself unable to stop revisiting the moment in my thoughts. The manner in which his voice had taken on a gentler quality, the way his gaze had held onto mine, from that night forward. Everything started to shift. Daniel appeared to create more reasons to linger. When I was by myself. He would seek my thoughts on insignificant issues, hang around the kitchen as I prepared meals, or volunteer to assist with chores that didn't need his participation, despite my efforts to dismiss the fluttering sensation in my chest whenever he was close. It grew increasingly difficult with each passing day. I convinced myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, yet, beneath the surface, I was aware of the reality. A connection was forming between us. Something that thrilled me as much as it terrified me. The night when everything shifted, I was completely unaware of what lay ahead. It was a tranquil evening. The sort that typically enveloped me in a comforting sense of safety. Lisa attended a charity dinner. Clad in a sophisticated black gown, her hair was styled in an elegant updo. Daniel remained at home, claiming he had some work to complete, leaving me to follow my usual routine of putting the children to bed and tidying up. As I folded laundry in the living room, I recall softly humming to myself. The house was serene, a tranquil hush that typically came after the whirlwind of the children's bedtime antics. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Daniel standing in the doorway. He wasn't in his typical button-down shirt and slacks, but rather a simple t-shirt and jeans, his hair a bit tousled. "Are you still at it?" he inquired, his tone gentler than normal. "It's merely laundry," I responded, offering a fleeting smile. He moved in, settling onto the armrest of the couch. "You know, it's okay to not take on everything, Priya. You already contribute so much to our cause." "I didn't mind," I replied, even as his words stirred something within me. For a brief instant, he remained silent. He simply observed as I folded the clothes, his expression a mystery. Then, with a hint of reluctance, he remarked, "You're amazing with the kids. They hold you in the highest regard." A warm flush crept up my cheeks as I concentrated on the garments in my grasp. "Thank you very much. They are truly remarkable kids. What about you?" he continued, his voice lowering just a bit. "Your impact on our lives has been profoundly positive. I can't quite fathom how we got by before your arrival." His words carried a weight that quickened my pulse. I looked up at him, and our gazes locked. For a brief instant, neither of us stirred. The atmosphere surrounding us was electric, laden with an unarticulated tension. "Daniel," I began. Just as I was about to complete my thought, he leaned in and pressed his lips against mine. It was a bold kiss. It was brimming with yearning, with repressed feelings erupting all at once. For a brief moment, I was paralyzed, my thoughts urging me to halt, to shove him aside. Yet, at that moment, a part of me surrendered. I kissed him back, my hands quivering as they reached for him. The laundry fell from my lap, neglected, as Daniel drew me nearer. His hands were warm, steady as they lingered on my waist. I sensed the power in his arms. The way they embraced me as if I were something invaluable. As we finally separated, gasping for air, I found it impossible to meet his gaze. My heart was pounding, and a wave of guilt surged through me. I can't do this, I whispered, my voice barely rising above a whisper. I understand, he responded, yet. The expression in his gaze revealed an entirely different narrative. That night, I lay awake in my bed, replaying the kiss repeatedly in my thoughts. I convinced myself it was an error. A fleeting lapse in judgment that would never occur once more, yet, beneath the surface, I was aware of the reality. There was a change in the air between us. An undeniable shift that demanded my attention. The following day, I steered clear of him as much as possible. I concentrated on my responsibilities, ensuring that my exchanges with him remained succinct and formal. Yet, each time our gazes intertwined, I experienced that familiar tug, that unmistakable bond. It didn't take long before we found ourselves crossing the line once more. This time, it was in the kitchen. I was chopping vegetables for dinner when he approached from behind, his presence creating a palpable tension in the air. A chill runs down my spine. Priya, he murmured gently, his voice just a breath above silence. I turned to face him, and before I could utter a word, he gently cupped my face in his hands and kissed me. This time, it felt distinct, gradually, more profoundly, as though he were relishing each instant. From that moment forward, there was no turning back. Our relationship blossomed, rich with hidden encounters and hushed confessions. We shall convene in the quiet hours of the morning, when Lisa and the children were nestled in sleep, or during those fleeting moments when the house stood empty. Every moment seemed increasingly perilous than the one before. Yet, I found it impossible to halt my actions. Daniel had a unique ability to awaken a sense of vitality within me, allowing me to momentarily set aside the solitude that had lingered in my life for ages. Yet, even amid our fervor, the persistent guilt clung to me relentlessly. No matter how hard I attempted to brush it aside, the gravity of our actions was perpetually present, lurking in the recesses of my thoughts, and yet, I found myself unable to turn my back and leave. Leading a double life was equally exhilarating and draining. During the day, I took on the role of a devoted caregiver, engaging with Emily and Jake, assisting them with their homework and ensuring the home functioned efficiently. By night, I transformed into something entirely different, a woman ensnared in a tempest of illicit desire. Daniel and I mastered the art of concealing our relationship. We steered clear of eye contact whenever Lisa was present, maintaining our discussions short and light, ensuring our secret moments remained concealed behind closed doors or during times we were certain no one would interrupt us. Daniel and I found ourselves alone in the house. I was arranging the children's toys in the playroom when he entered, closing the door softly behind him. "You've been dodging me," he remarked, his tone soft yet playful. "I haven't," I responded swiftly, even though we both understood it wasn't the truth. He moved nearer, the fervor in his eyes causing my heart to quicken. "Priya, you needn't carry that guilt whenever you glance my way." I turned my gaze, my fingers awkwardly toying with a pile of building blocks. "Lisa doesn't deserve this," I murmured softly. "And what about what I deserve?" he countered, his voice now more gentle. "These past few months have brought me more happiness than I've experienced in years. That's due to you." I was at a loss for how to reply to that. His words constricted my chest, a mix of guilt and yearning swirling within me, before I could formulate a response. He leaned in and gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers grazing my skin. "Priya," he murmured, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper, "you are the most wonderful thing that has ever come into my life." A lengthy duration. It was moments like these that made it impossible for me to turn my back. When he gazed at me in that manner, when he addressed me with such a soft, sincere tone, I felt as though I was the sole person in existence who held significance for him. Yet, the truth of our circumstances was always present in my thoughts. Each time I witnessed Lisa sharing laughter with her children or expressing gratitude for my help, a wave of guilt washed over me. I began to scrutinize everything, my decisions, my emotions, and even my value. How could I be disloyal? Someone who had demonstrated nothing but compassion, and yet, I found myself unable to cease. Our hidden encounters became increasingly regular and bold. Stolen kisses filled the kitchen while the children played outside. Whispered conversations lingered late at night when the world was asleep, and there were even a few fleeting encounters in his car during Lisa's errands. One evening, once the children were tucked in, Daniel and I found ourselves in his office, the door securely locked to prevent any interruptions. He served us. He poured a glass of wine, an act he seldom indulged in. And we lingered in silence for a moment before he began to speak. "Have you ever wished you could change this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I paused, swirling the wine in my glass. "Each day," I acknowledged, "yet that doesn't imply I desire it to conclude." He extended his hand, his fingers weaving seamlessly with mine. "Neither do I," he murmured gently. The impact of his words lingered with me long after I departed from his office that night. Despite my desire to embrace the reality of our connection, a lingering doubt gnawed at me, whispering that it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. The weight of remorse was like a whisper, ever present, always watching. No matter how hard Daniel attempted to comfort me, I couldn't quiet the nagging voice in my mind that constantly echoed the betrayal I was enacting each and every day. Lisa's kindness only exacerbated the situation. She frequently expressed her gratitude, emphasizing how fortunate they felt to have me in their lives. Her faith in me was steadfast. And that faith felt like a blade digging deeper with each moment I shared with her husband. One afternoon, Lisa and I were seated in the living room as the children slumbered peacefully. She was scrolling through her phone, sipping tea, when she suddenly looked up at me with a smile. "Priya," she said with heartfelt warmth, "you have truly been a blessing to this family. I can't fathom how we got by before your arrival." Her words, intended as a compliment, struck me like a blow. I managed a smile, whispering a thank you, yet deep down I felt like I was falling apart. How could I meet her gaze, fully aware of the actions I was taking in secret? That evening, I lingered in my room more than I typically would, sidestepping Daniel's frequent efforts to engage me in conversation. I gazed at the ceiling, echoing Lisa's words in my thoughts. Did it hold value? Was the passion and connection I felt with Daniel worth the betrayal of a woman who had treated me like family? However, when Daniel knocked on my door later that night, all my determination faded. He stood there, his expression grave, and without uttering a word, entered the room, and shut the door softly behind him. "I understand you're feeling this way," he said, perched on the edge of my bed. "It's not fair," I spilled forth, my voice quivering. "What are we doing? That's not right, Daniel. Lisa is not worthy of this treatment. The children should not have to endure this." He reached for my hand, his touch igniting a familiar warmth within me. "I understand it's complicated, Priya, but it feels right to me." His words wrapped around my guilt, offering a soothing touch even as they stirred the chaos within me. I yearned to trust him, to hold on to the notion that what we shared was something deeper than mere transience. Intrigue, however. The burden of our actions was becoming increasingly difficult to endure. In the days that followed, I immersed myself in my work, seeking to establish a separation between us. I steered clear of spending time alone with Daniel, brushed off his messages, and made sure our exchanges were as short as they could be. Yet it felt as though one was attempting to restrain the relentless waves. No matter how hard I fought against it, I found myself unable to break free from the magnetic draw he exerted on me. One evening, I found myself in the children's playroom, observing Emily and Jake as they constructed a tower with their blocks. Their laughter resonated throughout the space. Innocent and unblemished by the complexities of grown-up existence, for a fleeting instant, I found myself envious of them, their purity, their liberation from guilt and remorse. Emily gazed up at me with her large blue eyes and asked, "Priya, will you stay with us forever?" Her words constricted my chest. I mustered a smile and said, "I'll be here for as long as you need me." Yet, as the words left my lips, a part of me recognized their falsehood. I could no longer sustain this dual existence. Change was necessary. Chapter 6: The Turning Point. Everything reached a climax one evening, when Lisa returned home sooner than anticipated. I had occupied my day with errands and chores, attempting to steer clear of Daniel. But he managed to corner me in the kitchen once the children were tucked in for the night. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice grave. "Daniel, not now," I whispered, casting a wary glance toward the hallway. "Priya," he murmured, moving nearer, his fingers lightly grazing against mine. "We can't continue to approach this in a half-hearted manner. The creak of the front door swinging open interrupted him. My heart soared as Lisa's voice rang out. "I'm home." Daniel halted, his hand lingering on mine, and for a brief moment, we remained motionless. Then, as if emerging from a dream, he took a step back, his expression a mystery. I swiftly moved to the sink, feigning the act of washing a dish as Lisa entered the kitchen. "Hey!" she exclaimed with a bright smile, placing her purse on the counter. "Are you both still awake?" "Just wrapping up some work," Daniel remarked smoothly, his voice unwavering. Lisa appeared oblivious to anything unusual, yet the near miss left me feeling rattled. Later that night, as I lay in bed, my mind was consumed with thoughts of what might have transpired had she entered just a few seconds sooner. The gamble we were engaging in seemed excessively high, and for the first time, I began to doubt if this entanglement was truly worthwhile. The next day, Daniel attempted to engage me once more, yet I sidestepped him, asserting that I was occupied with the children. I required some time to reflect to determine what I truly desired. That evening, while I found myself in solitude within my room, Daniel rapped on my door. This time, I allowed him to enter. I interjected, halting him before he had the chance to respond, his brow knitted in concentration as he moved in closer. "Priya, I understand your fear, but it's more than just that," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "That's not right, Daniel. Lisa, have faith in me. The children adore me. I can no longer continue to betray them in this manner." He settled onto the edge of my bed, his fingers combing through his hair. "Do you really believe I don't experience guilt?" "I do, every day, yet I am fully aware that my feelings for you are genuine. I simply can't switch it off." His words stirred a deep ache within me, yet they failed to wash away the guilt. "It doesn't matter how we feel," I murmured gently. "We are causing pain to those who do not merit it." For the first time, I noticed a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "Priya," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm unsure about how to release you from my life." I turned my gaze, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "Perhaps it's time we discovered the way." The days that came after were among the most challenging of my existence. I steered clear of Daniel whenever I could, channeling all my efforts into looking after Emily and Jake. Yet, as I attempted to forge ahead, the burden of our relationship remained, an unending reminder of the boundaries we had breached. One evening, Lisa invited me to join her as the children played outside. She poured us both a cup of tea and remarked, "You've been quieter lately. Is everything all right?" For a brief instant, I considered revealing the truth to her. The words lingered just at the edge of my consciousness, yet I found myself unable to voice them. Instead, I mustered a smile and replied, "I've just been a bit weary, nothing to be concerned about." She nodded, her eyes brimming with worry. "You put in so much effort, Priya. If you ever require assistance, feel free to reach out to me." Her kindness intensified my guilt to an unbearable degree. That night, as I lay in bed, I came to a resolution. I couldn't continue existing like this. I couldn't continue deceiving Lisa and acting as if everything was okay. The following morning, I composed a resignation letter. I failed to convey the true motive behind my leaving. How could I? Instead, I informed Lisa that I had to go back to India to look after my elderly parents. As I presented her with the letter, her expression turned to one of disbelief. "Priya, are you certain? Is there anything we can assist with?" "No," I said, mustering a smile. "This is a task I must undertake." Daniel remained quiet when he learned about my departure. He trapped me in the hallway one final time, his gaze brimming with a blend of sorrow and exasperation. "Is this truly what you desire?" he inquired. "It's exactly what I need," I replied, my voice resolute. As I departed, Lisa embraced me with a firm grip, her eyes glistening with tears. Emily and Jake held onto me tightly, pleading for me to remain. And it required all my strength to keep from falling apart. Daniel stood by the door, hands tucked into his pockets, his expression a mystery. As the taxi drove off from the house, a peculiar blend of relief and sadness washed over me. I understood I was choosing wisely, yet the pain remained undeniably real, even now, as I sit in my small apartment, distant from the Harrisons. They remain on my mind. I find myself pondering whether Lisa ever had any inkling, if Daniel has truly moved forward, and if Emily and Jake still hold any memories of me, yet, above all else, I find myself questioning whether I will ever be able to forgive myself for my actions, for the love I took, the trust one shattered, and the life I abandoned.